Hi, it's Mike DelSignore, Massachusetts OUI lawyer. In today's video, I want to answer the common question, will you go to jail on a first offense OUI? The answer is generally no. It would be very rare, unusual for anyone to go to jail on a first OUI. It can happen, but it's got to be a real outrageous case or something unique. I've seen a lot of OUIs, typically doesn't happen. So first offense OUI, realistically, you're not looking at jail time. You may read when you read online about the law that the penalty is up to 2.5 years house of correction. That is not what happens. People don't go to jail on a first OUI. So what are the typical penalties on a first offense OUI? Typically, if someone, even if they're found guilty after trial, they're going to be given a probationary period of 1 year, a 45-day license loss, and the requirement to complete what's known as the 24D or the MID program. It's basically a 40-hour, 16-week class, alcohol education class. If you complete that class, that's the bulk of your probation. You avoid any further criminal difficulties, the case will be done. So after trial, your typical penalty on a first OUI would be a 1-year probation and the requirement you do this program 45-day license loss. Now that would be a guilty finding if it was after trial. Now, what are the possible resolutions prior to trial? If you want to admit to an OUI, typically somebody will get what's referred to as a continuance without a finding. The terms and conditions would be the same in most cases as if you were found guilty after trial, meaning you get the 1-year probation, have to do the 40-hour, 16-week alcohol education program, and have a 45-day license loss. Those are your common penalties when facing a first offense OUI. The penalties can be more severe, but that would be if there's a case of serious bodily injury, potentially you had a child in the car, but your typical first offense OUI is not a case where you're realistically looking at jail time. So I would not enter into a plea because you fear committed time. There's other reasons why you might enter into a plea, but that's not something I would consider just because it's so highly unlikely that unless you have a real unusual case, that's usually not something you need to be concerned with. The judges in Massachusetts, by and large, are very reasonable, compassionate. I don't find that they punish people unnecessarily or without any reason, and they certainly don't send people to jail who have no prior record and commit a first OUI, which is a misdemeanor offense. Now, first offense OUIs, what you really need to know is these are very winnable cases. In other words, it's easy to get arrested for a first OUI, but it's difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. The government needs to prove. So, field sobriety tests, these are very subjective exercises. The fact that maybe you didn't balance perfectly or stepped offline, that doesn't mean that they prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a lot of reasons why these tests aren't accurate. Could be a medical condition, could be you were nervous, it could be you were tired. Maybe you just don't pick up on instructions that well. So there's a lot of reasons why these tests really don't strongly suggest you're impaired. And when we watch the videos, and more departments have videos, state police typically has the entire process on video, we see the report isn't quite accurate. There's things in the report that are missing from what actually happened. I had a case recently where the report didn't mention there was another accident. My client's doing the field sobriety. If you read the report, you don't know about this major distraction. Officers, and they don't always do that intentionally, but sometimes they might, or sometimes it just might be they're careless and they're just looking to include the details in the report that support their decision to arrest. Now, and on the witness stand, they may actually acknowledge things that actually happened, but keep in mind, these reports aren't always accurate, they're not always reliable, they're not always exactly what happened. So when you read your police report, I wouldn't take too much stock in the fact that the report says you failed field sobriety tests. I've looked at a lot of these reports. If you have a case and you're trying to decide whether to resolve it, go to trial, try to figure out what are the potential penalties. Feel free, call me, text me, I'll go over the report with you. I'll help you through it. I'll show you what's good about the case, what's bad about the case, where the pitfalls are, if the government was to prove this case, why they would, and where we'll be able to show reasonable doubt and hopefully have you found not guilty after trial. Stay calm. Understand that while you're nervous about being arrested, there's a lot of ways I can help you. Call me, text me anytime. My name's Mike DelSignore, 781-686-5924.